Hey, buddy, welcome to StreamSemester.com's Teaching to the Test Pattern. I'm Tom White, and today, listen, I'm so excited. I actually took the entire day off of work to produce this podcast. I didn't, but I do have the day off, and I am producing this podcast, and I'm super duper excited about it because it's about Blackmagic Design, as you've probably already seen from the title. And in my opinion, Blackmagic Design has done more for video production education than the argument could be made than all manufacturers for a lot of reasons. I'm not saying that they're 100% applicable to everyone and that everyone should buy them, but what I am saying is that their products have done so much to push what we do forward that they can't be denied. So, and here's why. The growing trend in video production education is that schools are seeing it being successful in other places, and they're trying to build a program like that for themselves. And in doing so, sometimes they find someone to start a program who doesn't have a lot of experience. That's where Blackmagic Design products come in. They're not something that is good. There's a steep learning curve with. You could literally, the ATEM Mini, for example, A, cost effective, B, really simple to set up and use. And I really love them for that, for new educators and educators in general trying to start a program, because often you run into two problems when you're starting a program. One is the knowledge of how to do things, and the ATEM series from Blackmagic Design takes that off the table. You push the button that you want for the camera that you want, and it works. And B, cost. To start a good program, or what people think is a good program, oftentimes takes $100,000, $200,000. A lot of schools can't make that commitment to start. Blackmagic Design comes in with a lot of very cost-effective tools, from their switchers, their cameras, their audio stuff, all of that, and really, really make life get going for a new program and a new video production educator. And it's been about a week since they announced what I'm going to talk about today. There's 5 things that we're going to talk about today. New ATEM, which is their TV switcher. New camera, an update to an older camera, and a new piece of equipment that I'm still struggling with how to integrate it into your classroom. But we'll talk about that. So let's go ahead and get started. Last Thursday, Grant Petty came on Facebook and YouTube with a live stream, as he always does, with what I like to call the Mary Poppins of countertops, because it's like he starts and there's nothing on the counter. And then as he goes, he's like, here's the new, and he picks it up and sets it on the counter. And then he's like, oh, well, we need a monitor, and we need, and so he literally, for an hour, just pulls things out from under this counter and talks about them. And the first thing that he pulled last week was the ATEM Television Studio HD8. And you get a good look at it here. So here's why Blackmagic continues to impress me. Several years ago, they came out with their advanced panels, which is basically what you see here, minus some of the knobs. It looks almost identical. And it was basically to control your ATEM, to switch. We have 2 of them that we use at our church. We have one for our stream and one for our in-house iMag shots. But that's it. It was just a video switcher. Well, the ATEM TV Studio HD8, which is a mouthful, is that TV switcher with an encoder, with an up, down, and cross converter for all inputs. You got in and outs on all the inputs. You've got audio controls, and there's an optional internal storage, and we'll get into that in just a bit. So here is the HD8, and they also came out with the HD8 ISO. Looks exactly the same. The big difference is the ISO will allow you to not only record your program feed, which the HD8 will do, the HD8 ISO will allow you to isolate all of your up to 8 inputs as separate recordings. And where that's important is if you're going to go back and post, or if you're in a situation, one of the ways that I started my program and my program became successful is we provided coaching footage. We didn't have an HD8 ISO at the time. So what we would have to do is literally we would run it through in distribution amps and all that stuff. Well, now you would have your coaching footage. If that's, say, your camera 1 is your high wide and camera 2 is your high tight for football, your coaching footage is already done, and you have your program feed. So it records. It also streams, which is awesome. It's got the same workflow as all of the ATEM products. That's another great thing about Blackmagic Design. If you're learning how to produce TV shows and you're learning how to produce live content, and you start with the $295 ATEM Mini and you proceed all the way up to even the Constellation, you go past the TV Studio HD8 and you go to the Constellation, which is their 8D rack-mounted solution, the software is the same all the way. It looks the same, it acts the same, it works the same. The only difference is you have some different options. So the ATEM Studio HD8 ISO is a great tool. So we'll kind of go through there. Obviously, there's your price, by the way. $39.95 for an 8-input switcher with 8 audio controls on the panel. You can run macros, and what a macro is, you punch a button and it, like if I were smart, I would have set a macro up for this so that I could easily toggle between, my intro screen, like here, and my screen capture. But I'm not using an ATEM at this point. So you can set up macros that are fired from the board. You can do all kinds of stuff. And and the $39.95 is for the ISO. The non-ISO, just the standard HD8, is $29.95. Here, 8 SDI inputs, 12 SDI video outputs. You have 2 SDI auxes. You have a program out that is SDI as well. 2 USB-C outputs for webcams. Literally, you can take this board, set it down, plug it into your computer. You could go to Zoom. You can go to YouTube. It looks like a webcam to your computer. Super awesome. You have, on the audio side, you have the XLR that you would expect. So you have a pair of XLR cables. So let's say you're running your audio off camera. You've got a mic set up that you're running with a mixer off camera. You can run your audio out of your mixer into the ATEM Studio HD8, and boom, you're good to go. You also have RCA, and you also have XLR TalkBack, which is a great tool, and they've updated it to be 5-pin XLR as opposed to the old aviation headsets. So 5-pin XLR cables are easier to find, and they're cables and headsets, and they're far more cost efficient. In terms of control panel connection, Ethernet, you can, again, Blackmagic Design. So let's say school setting, your control panel, you plug it in, you connect it to your network, it gets an IP address. You can literally have students doing different jobs off of just that one box. So you could have a kid sitting next to it who their only job is to make sure the right graphic is set up in the graphics bin. You could have a kid next to them. If you are running cameras on or mics on your cameras, you could have a kid that's mixing audio through their computer with the ATEM control software. So super easy. You can also direct connect into a computer and manage those things that way. But for a classroom, you're starting a new program, you're looking for, you got to go big. So you're looking at the HD8. You buy the HD8, you set up 4 cameras in your studio. They've got mics on them. You have a student punching the buttons. Okay. You have a student as your technical director. You have a student as your director. You have a student who is your audio person. You have a student who is your graphics person. You have a floor manager. You have 3 or 4 people on camera, and maybe somebody in there to make sure the cameras are pointed directly or ported properly. That's most of a class in terms of staffing. So that's a good way to use that. A lot of these things that are in here, honestly, you probably won't use at this point in your career. If you're looking at it, time code, reference in and outs, you won't need any of that. So here's the back of it. Again, if you're new to it, it looks crazy, but it's really, really quite simple. Here are your inputs. So you plug your cable from your cameras in here. If you want to loop those out, so let's say you want a monitor wall or whatever, you can do that right there. There's your program out. There is your multi-view. When you connect an HDMI cable to a monitor, you have a ton of options in terms of what you see. I think there's a 16 panel option, so it's quadrants of 4. So you could have preview and program up top, and then all of your inputs down below that. So scrolling down a little bit further, it goes up to 1080 60p. Again, super cool, because if you're doing sports, you want to go that high. You have upstream keyers and downstream keyers, and that's where you would throw your graphics. You can also chroma key in there. And Super Source here is the ability to layer multiple things, multiple shots. So you could do a picture-in-picture. Let's say you have a sideline reporter for a football game. You could create a Super Source where the game is happening, and then your sideline reporter is live there as well. You have Tally, which connects to your cameras to let them know, hey, you're hot or you're queued. Direct streaming. Connect it to the internet, go into the control software, set your settings, YouTube, Twitch, whatever you're streaming to, hit stream and go. I mean, it really is that simple. Recording, USB-C out, so something like a portable hard drive would be great for this. USB-C into that, and you're recording a program feed. If you just get the HD8, you're recording the program feed and your inputs if it's the HD8 ISO. Here's the other beautiful thing. DaVinci Resolve is Blackmagic Design's software for editing. If you go in with the HD8 ISO and you record all of your 8 cameras plus your program feed, you drop that into DaVinci Resolve, which is free for the base, and then I think it's a $3.99 charge. I may be wrong on that. Don't quote me on that. For the advanced, the pro level, I forget what it's called. And you drop your project file in there. All of your cameras are synced with the program. So let's say that you did an event, a play, and your tech director or your director missed a switch. Well, you can go back in and edit it, drop the right camera as the hot camera, export it out, and you're good to go. Again, multi-view, we talked about that a minute ago. Media player, you can do some small media clips up to 400 frames. So you're talking, what's that, 10 seconds? 12 seconds, 14 seconds, something like that. So if you have a small animated segment you could play, it'll do that. It'll also do your graphics. So you see their PNG, bitmaps, GIFs, JPEGs, TIFFs. It'll play all of that. You could do audio. So if you want to play a music track as a background for an opener, you can as well. When it comes to software, you get the control panel software. It's super easy to use, and you set it up and it's good to go, and you update your control panel regularly through the software updates. Pretty simple. Here is another thing that Blackmagic Design did that I absolutely love. It's a little over 2 feet wide. It's about 14 inches deep. And if you notice here in this design, there's a lip. And that's so if you wanted to flush mount this panel, meaning cut a hole in your desk, put it flat, and it looks like it's a beautiful application. It looks great, it works great, and it just lays down in there. It's a great thing, and you can see here that lip, and it would just kind of flatten that out. Again, the HD8 and the HD8 ISO, you see the prices there. The big difference is that it records on the ISO. It records the 8 camera inputs, but that's really it. That's the big difference. And I mentioned earlier about memory. With this model, if you don't want to take an external hard drive like this, you can buy the optional up to 2 gigabytes of flash memory installed. So now it's recording, you can stream, you can record all 8, you can do all of those things inside of that one box. So I highly recommend the HD8 ISO for a program that may not necessarily be just starting. Maybe it's a program that's a couple years in. You're starting to get your feet under you. Or if you're a program, listen, this would be great for mobile applications. You drop this guy in a rack, or if you're one of those who are lucky enough to have a trailer, you drop it in a trailer. It's small enough, it's powerful enough to do everything you want it to do. Really, really powerful tool. So definitely consider that. The next thing that Blackmagic Design announced was the Studio Camera 6K Pro. Their cameras get better every time they release one. I remember the original studio camera. I was like, meh, okay, so it's got a big monitor, but it's got a micro four thirds mount. And I've said that every studio camera until this one. I have one micro four thirds lens, and I only have it because of some Blackmagic Design cameras that I've got. I have probably 15 EF mount lenses. Blackmagic listened. The new Studio Camera 6K Pro has an EF lens mount. What does that mean for you? A much larger selection of lenses available. Most of them are more inexpensive, and there's a much larger bank of used lenses if that's the direction you want to go. It's where I typically go. It knocks a couple $100 off. Really cost effective there. So what is the studio camera? It's a camera. It's a monitor. Let's skip down here to the pictures so maybe you can see better. There we go. So this is the front of the camera, obviously, and this is the back. That monitor is always on. You can set it as your camera monitor, so literally seeing what you have coming through the lens, or you can hit a button and you can see program. It's got a ton of options when it comes inside that camera, including built-in speakers, built-in microphone. You can add a microphone, obviously. It's got XLR inputs. You can stream directly from the camera. Why is this important? With the Blackmagic Design, the cameras, you can connect over your phone, and Grant Petty showed that in the video, and I will link to that video in the description for this so you can see the whole thing from the professional. But you can stream from your phone. Couple of additions, and you can stream remotely from the camera via your phone to your switcher. And it doesn't have to necessarily be your phone. You can do it over the Ethernet. So let's say you have an event in your auditorium. You connect the camera to your network. Your network is connected to the switcher. You're using, I forget what the add-on is now because I just forgot it. It just left my brain. But now you can bring that camera in remotely, and it's super, super cool. It doesn't do SD at all, as you see there, but it will do up to 4K at 60p. That's pretty awesome. Okay, that is awesome in terms of future-proofing your program, and that's how I sold a CTA Director on it several weeks ago. Is that yes, you can buy a camera that's 1080 at 60p, and yes, it's going to be similarly priced, but it's not future proofing. It's not getting into the 4K space, which is next. And this is actually a 6K camera. Again, with this one, you can connect to USB, so you can connect some hard drives if you're recording and want to isolate that, and you didn't buy the HD8 ISO, you could record it that way. Tons and tons of codecs. You can do, if you wanted to use this as like a cinema camera, kinda, you could. I wouldn't suggest it, but you could. They have a cinema camera. Blackmagic does. It's really, really, really sexy. So here's your storage rates, all of that stuff. We cancel all of that. You can buy the optional focus and zoom controls for the camera. So put them on your tripod. Now you can zoom and focus, and it will work with your lenses. Make sure you get the right type of lenses. You'll have to do a little digging to make sure that you get the proper lenses to go with that. You can control the camera remotely. And here is where being in that Blackmagic Design biosphere really comes into play. So let's say you have the HD8 and you bought this Studio Camera 6K. You can, over the SDI cable, over an SDI cable, control that camera. You can iris up and down. You can control shutter speed. You can control white balance. You can control most of your options that you would control in a camera through the panel of the HD8 ISO, as well as the other Blackmagic Design products that are ATEMs, but we're focusing on the HD8 ISO today. That's you don't have to have a separate coloring position. You don't have to have a separate bank of controls. Also, you can do it in the software control. So the software control that we talked about, controlling audio, graphics, all of those things, you can control your cameras. So you can iris up and down, you can zoom in and out, you can do a lot of things just right there inside the software. You have tally for the front and back on these cameras, as you can see. Talkback, we talked a moment ago about the talkback on the ATEM. The camera obviously is the other end of that 5-pin XLR talkback. Director can talk back and forth to the camera operators via that. Again, pretty good looking camera there. You see all the options. It's really a good tool, good option, and another way to future-proof your program. So I said they came out with an update for a camera. This is the 4K Pro G2. That too is a mouthful. Again, very similar to the others. Price, $1,865. Pretty undeniable there. This one is an active Micro Four Thirds mount, which means you have to have one of the active Micro Four Thirds lenses in order to take care of iris, focus, and zoom. Now you notice here it says iris, focus, and zoom on supported lenses. If you don't have that, you can still focus and zoom with manually. You can still do it manually. Iris is a bit of an issue, but you can work through that. Lots of cool things in here. Just wanted to make you aware of that one. If you were going to do this, you might as well do this. I mean, go ahead and get the full kitty for, what's that, $600 more? Not a big deal, especially if you're going in that deep. And then finally, the ATEM microconverter. So let me back up to the HD8 ISO here, or HD8 Studio. And you see here on, where's audio? There we go. You see right here, it says, where is it? I thought it was on this end. Right here. MADI in and out. What MADI is an audio transport tool. And it allows you to send multiple audio channels over SDI. So for this example, the microphone converter, you can take 4 microphones right here as an input and take them out of this SDI output right into your ATEM Studio HD8. And what that does is it puts 4 more audio inputs on the HD8. So if you have, let me see if I can get a good top view here. Right here, you can see these little knobs. Those can be used as audio controllers. So let's say you don't have a separate audio mixer. You can have your technical director mix audio right there on that panel. And that's what this tool allows you to do. Now, I don't know where this would come into education typically, because if you're going to do this, just run the mics into the camera. But let's say you have a band coming in and you're trying to do a multi-track recording and you want to mix everything. That may be the option. I'm not really sure where this would work in our setting in education. I see where it would work in several professional settings, but it basically allows you to bring in 4 microphones. Or let me back up. It allows you to bring microphones in sets of 4 to the ATEM Studio HD8, because you can take and daisy chain these microphone converters. You see MADI in, so we would just loop out so if you had 2 of these, you take the output from one to the input of another and loop it out. So again, I cannot recommend enough the ATEM Studio HD8 and the HD8 ISO, depending on what your application is. If you're doing sports and you're at a point where you're building a mobile kit and you want to, and you're not worrying a lot about replay at this point or firing a bunch of crazy graphics, this is great. I'm not saying you can't do that with this, but this is a good starting point. If you're starting your program, this is where to start with with your streaming efforts. 8 inputs. Most of you are going to have 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 cameras. As you build your program, you can add on additional things like the Blackmagic HyperDecks. You could add on a computer to do playback for commercials or that kind of stuff. You can do a lot of stuff with it, and I highly recommend that you consider this if you're in that spot. If you are starting a new program and you're honest with yourself and you're looking around and you're looking at all these different options and you really don't know what's what, I cannot say enough to start with something like this HD8. It's going to let you mix your cameras. It's going to let you add your graphics. Add a HDMI to SDI converter between a computer and this, and you can do your playback. So if you have packages and interviews and that kind of stuff, and it's a simple way to get started with your live productions. So if you have any questions, hit us up on any of our socials. I'm more than willing to help. Shoot us an email. Go to streamsemester.com. Our information is there. Send us a message. I'll be glad to chat with you about what some of your other options are. But again, I really, if you are in a space where you're starting your program or you're building out your program and you're looking for a cost-effective tool, I'll be honest with you, when I was in the classroom and we were doing live sports, I used the ATEM Mini, the 8-channel Mini. I can't remember the name of it at this point. But I used that, and I didn't have any other tools. I didn't need anything else. I had 8 cameras potentially. We used, I think, an average of 6. And I would play back interviews and commercials and packages and that kind of stuff through our streaming software. So there's lots and lots of options here that you can get started with. If you're building out a studio, definitely check out the 4K camera, the 6K cameras from Blackmagic Design. If you're using these ATEM switchers. And again, thank you so much for listening and being a fan. And as always, go out and make some awesome.